Since 2000, the Arctic has lost nearly half its summer sea ice. This is not an environmental story. It is the quiet emergence of the world's next battleground. 13% of Earth's undiscovered oil, 30% of its gas and shipping routes that are 7,000 kilometers shorter than today's, all lie beneath retreating ice. So what happens when three rival powers start claiming the same frontier? The answer begins long before the melt. To understand why the Arctic is now a magnet for global power, it helps to listen to those who have called it home for thousands of years. An Inuit elder once said, "We follow the animals, respect the ice, and stay on the land." For generations, indigenous communities have mapped their lives along shifting routes: summer hunting camps on ice-free islands, winter villages tucked into sheltered bays. These patterns, recorded in oral histories and community archives, are proof that the Arctic has never been empty. It is a lived-in, carefully read landscape where survival depends on reading changes in ice, animal migrations, and weather. But the Arctic's human story does not end with traditional knowledge. In the 20th century, the region became a stage for military ambition. The Soviet Union, seeing the ice as both a shield and a frontier, poured $1.2 billion a year into Arctic infrastructure. By the late 1970s, 29 permanent Soviet installations dotted the coastline, from Murmansk to Pevek, each one tethered to a network of airfields and naval bases. Nuclear-powered icebreakers like the Arctica class carved through 2 meters of multi-year ice, opening supply corridors and projecting force across 3,800 kilometers of newly fortified shoreline. What emerges is a region shaped by two logics: subsistence and strategy. Indigenous routes crisscross the same waters as Cold War supply chains, sometimes overlapping, sometimes colliding. The groundwork for today's scramble was laid well before the ice began to melt at record speed. Now, as the old barriers thin, both the wisdom of elders and the infrastructure of superpowers are being tested in ways no one could have predicted. Arctic sea ice once stood as a wall, thick, unbroken, and largely impassable. That wall is collapsing at a speed few anticipated. Satellite records from the National Snow and Ice Data Center show that in September 2000, the minimum sea ice extent covered 7.3 million square kilometers. By 2025, that figure has shrunk to just 4 million, a 45% drop in a single generation. The ice is not just retreating at the edges, it is thinning from within. Multi-year ice, the hardest and oldest in the pack, made up about 70% of the Arctic's cover at the turn of the millennium. Today, it is closer to 35%. What remains is younger, weaker, and far more vulnerable to summer melt and wind-driven breakup. This transformation is not gradual, it is accelerating. The average thickness has fallen from 2.5 meters to barely over 1 meter. That means where once only nuclear icebreakers could force a path, now even standard ice-class cargo ships can navigate during the open water season. The annual window when the ice falls below key thresholds, 15% concentration and 0.3 meters thickness, has stretched from 80 days in the 1990s to about 115 days today. These are not just numbers, they are the physical facts that unlock the region, turning what was a natural barrier into an open invitation. The Arctic is no longer a frozen moat, it is a gateway, and every degree of warming widens the door for ships, drills, and patrols. This is the catalyst. Access on a scale never seen before is up for grabs. A shipping executive in Rotterdam stares at the latest sea ice charts, running the numbers. The Northern Sea Route, tracing Russia's Arctic coast, now shaves 7,000 kilometers off the Shanghai to Rotterdam run compared to the Suez Canal. That is nearly 2 weeks less at sea, 17 days instead of 30. On paper, the savings are obvious: less fuel burned, fewer crew days, and a direct path that avoids the bottlenecks of southern choke points. But the calculations do not stop there. Every voyage north means navigating a corridor defined by strict physical limits. For most cargo ships, the route only opens when sea ice concentration drops below 15% and thickness falls under 0.3 meters. Those thresholds used to hold for a few weeks, but now stretch to nearly 4 months each year. The open water window has grown from 80 days in the 1990s to about 115 days today. Each extra day matters. It means more vessels can make the trip, more cargo can move, and the seasonal gamble becomes a calculated risk. Yet, there is a catch. Only ships built to ice-class standards, with reinforced hulls, heated ballast tanks, and specialized navigation, can legally operate. The International Maritime Organization's Polar Code sets the rules, and insurance companies demand compliance. Owners weigh the cost of upgrades and icebreaker escorts against the lure of faster routes and lower fuel bills. For some, the math is starting to work. A 2023 LNG carrier saved 9 days and 7,400 kilometers versus the Suez, cutting fuel use by over 1,000 tons. But for every successful transit, there are stories of sudden ice ridges, costly delays, and spiraling insurance premiums. Still, the economic logic is hard to ignore. Melting ice transforms the Arctic from a barrier into a shortcut. For global trade, that means the old boundaries of geography are dissolving, replaced by a new map where profit and risk are redrawn each summer. The next question is, who will capture the resources and control the lanes that are opening up? Beneath the Arctic's shrinking ice, vast reserves of oil and gas have become the world's latest prize. The United States Geological Survey estimates the region holds 13% of undiscovered global oil and nearly 30% of its natural gas, billions of barrels and trillions of cubic meters locked away beneath the seabed. These figures have triggered a rush, not of drill rigs, but of legal documents. Before extraction can begin, nations must first secure their rights on paper. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, is the framework guiding this scramble. Every Arctic coastal state receives a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, but UNCLOS offers more. If a country proves its continental shelf extends further, it can claim additional seabed. This process demands years of geological surveys, multi-beam sonar, seismic mapping, followed by technical reports submitted to the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. Reviews can take 4 years or longer, and in the Arctic, where claims overlap and data is scarce, a single submission may linger for over a decade. Russia led the way in 2001, targeting the Lomonosov and Mendeleev ridges. Canada and Denmark soon mapped overlapping extensions. The United States, though not a UNCLOS signatory, has submitted technical data for Alaska. Norway's Svalbard claim was largely approved in 2020. The Lomonosov Ridge remains the most contested, with all 5 Arctic states staking partial claims. Each submission is more than a technicality. It is a bid to secure future resource rights before the ice barrier recedes, setting the legal groundwork for the next phase, turning paper claims into real control. Russia's Arctic footprint is impossible to ignore. Along the Kola Peninsula, the port of Murmansk now hosts the world's largest fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers, including the new Arktika and Sibir, each capable of carving channels through nearly 3 meters of ice. These ships are not just tools of commerce, they are strategic assets, clearing the way for military convoys and securing Russia's year-round access to the northern sea route. Since 2015, Moscow has poured billions into upgrading Murmansk's docks, expanding airfields, and building radar installations that monitor every vessel entering the Barents and Kara Seas. NATO has answered with a force of its own. The annual Arctic Resolve exercises now bring over 30,000 troops to Norway and the North Atlantic, staging cold weather drills and live fire maneuvers within sight of Russian territory. Forward battle groups, equipped for sub-zero operations, have become a permanent feature in northern Norway and Iceland. Surveillance flights crisscross the region, while Allied ice-capable frigates shadow Russian patrols from a distance. Every new deployment, every upgraded base, feeds a cycle of action and reaction. The logic is simple. As one side builds capacity, the other matches or exceeds it. The result is a region where the line between routine patrol and provocation grows thinner by the month. What began as a contest for access has become a contest for control, and the Arctic's isolation is giving way to a global confrontation. China's Arctic ambitions have redrawn the map, turning a once-closed region into a global arena. China has poured billions into research, shipping, and infrastructure. At Cosmino, Chinese investment built a transshipment hub that moved 800,000 tons of cargo in its first season, making the Polar Silk Road a reality. State-owned firms have partnered on Arctic LNG, explored Greenland's minerals, and sent research vessels to chart new shipping lanes. Indigenous communities feel these changes daily. Vessel noise now drowns out whale calls, shifting bowhead and narwhal migrations. The Inuit Circumpolar Council recorded a 10-fold spike in underwater noise during shipping peaks, and a 2021 spill near Lancaster Sound shut down a vital hunting corridor for a month. The Arctic Council, established by the Ottawa Declaration, lacks authority over military or security matters, leaving disputes over shipping, resources, and sovereignty unresolved. As new actors arrive, the rules remain unfinished. As Arctic ice recedes, a new strategic frontier opens, where access breeds rivalry and weak governance fuels risk. Russia's military posture and China's ambitions ensure this contest is global, not regional. The world's next flashpoint is no longer at the margins, it is at the top of the map.